Hey friends and foes, welcome to Brushwork Podcast. My name is Stephanie Scott, and today we're talking about facing the blank canvas. I'm going to be honest with y'all. Today, I did not know what to record. I did not know what to record on this podcast. I did not know what to talk about. I didn't have a theme in mind, and I was just like staring at Audacity, which is what I use to record these podcasts, and I was thinking, what do I even talk about? What do I even do? And I was sitting at my computer, and I had the mouse hovering over the record button. And what do I even talk about? What do the people even want to hear? I have no ideas and I don't know what to do, but I have Tuesday coming up, which is launch day for the podcast for Brushwork here. And I was like, what do I even say? What do I even make? What would be worthwhile for the people to hear? And then I thought, this is a very similar feeling as whenever I have a blank canvas in front of me and I don't have any idea of what to paint. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to overcome the fear of the blank canvas, or in my case today, the fear of recording a podcast and having zero notes prepared. Here we are. We're doing the thing, and it's great. So here's my guide onto making something creatively, even when your brain is like, we got two brain cells and they've both flown out the window. Those moments when you're like, I don't know what to make. Those moments. So we're going to go through my little guide here. And I hope it helps. I kind of spent some time writing this out once I thought of this idea. And I was like, this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to dive into our blank canvas. So let me first put us into the mindset of where we are whenever we have a project to do, but we don't know what to make, right? So you've got your easel out, you've got your brushes, you've got some colors. I don't know if they're the colors you're going to use on the painting. You don't know if they're going to be the colors that you're going to use on the painting, but you've got the easel and you're looking at it and you're like, well, I could try this idea, or I could try that idea, or I could try this idea, but what if they aren't good? What if they're just not great? And what if someone else has done it, right? That's a little imposter syndrome. I feel like sometimes the blank canvas is also secretly imposter syndrome, but whatever. We don't have time to dive into that today. So we have these moments, right? And we're just like, okay, it's like, you gotta acknowledge here that it's really normal to feel intimidated by a blank sketchbook, a blank canvas, a blank recording for your audio here, for your podcast. And I'm not going to go so far as to say that it's an artist block, but it's on its way there, especially if you let it linger for too long. And especially if you let the blank canvas stay blank. If you let the recording stay empty. If you let the music sheet that you're working on stay just with no pencil marks or anything on it, right? If you let it stay empty, if you let the canvas stay blank, then you're letting that fear and you're letting this mind pattern that happens when you are approaching a blank canvas and that hesitancy comes in, you're letting that win. And that's establishing a new pattern for your creativity, and you do not want that habit. That is one of the worst habits you can indulge with your fears. So, as your first step for overcoming the blank canvas and facing it is to have the mindset of, no, we must make something, because if we don't, that is so much worse than letting it be blank. Like you must create something, even if it's bad, even if it's not what you intended, you must create something. Otherwise, you'll get stuck in this blank canvas pattern for way too long, and it's the worst. It's the worst. You don't want to do it. So you must make something. That's number one. That's accepting your fear. That is reducing the pressure of future times when the blank canvas comes to meet you. Okay, so my second step. I normally jump right to this, and some people need to take some other routes to get here, but my favorite method of approaching a blank canvas is just to mess it up, just to go crazy. I like to, if I ever get like a new sketchbook and you have that like perfect first page and it's like the paper is beautiful and it's great, I like to just like take a marker and like scribble on it. Just like make it imperfect immediately. Having the audacity just to like mess up your book and just to like make a scribble right in the get-go, right in the middle of the page where it's obvious and in your face and imperfect, it unleashes something within you. Because once you've made it imperfect there, it can be imperfect elsewhere, and ideas actually start happening. Okay, so with your canvas, that's an example for a sketchbook. For a canvas, if you're thinking, okay, Stephanie says to mess it up, just wreck it, just make a mess. I love to do this with a ground for your painting, right? So you have if you're a landscape painter, you're very familiar with this, but if you're a beginner, it is basically a wash of color to make the white canvas not white. Usually this is a brown or neutral of some kind, but I've seen people do it with a cadmium. It can be super blue, and it just sets the tone of your painting, and it can set the mood of the painting before you even have a concrete idea. And it can lead you to an idea just by putting some color down, just by putting a ground down. What this also does is gets you working with your material, right? When you mess up the blank canvas, when you mess up the blank sketchbook, you are, in doing so, you're picking up your pen, you're picking up brush, you're picking up a rag, you're picking up your color, you're pouring it onto the palette, and that has gotten you into the rhythms of making because you're handling the materials. That can install a little muscle memory in you, right? So once you start working, once you start scribbling and you start getting your pens out or whatever, it lends itself into having more creativity later on, and that's wonderful. So if step 1 was accept that this is totally normal to feel afraid of the blank canvas, step 2 is mess it up. And the more you mess it up, the better. Sometimes I'm like, should I start a business where I just mess up people's sketchbooks for them? Like every time I'm in a group, like this last residency I was at, people are like, oh, I got this brand new sketchbook and it's so pretty and it's so perfect and I don't want to like screw up the first page. I'm like, I'll do it for you. I'll mess it up for you. It can be kind of fun to have someone else mess up the first page for you. And if you don't like what you've made there's this amazing thing called whiteout, or an eraser, or a sticker that you can just put over the mark you made. And abracadabra, suddenly it's something you like. If it wasn't something you liked before. Step 3 is establish a ritual. If you are, say, someone who likes to create a lot, and you always go into the studio in a really different way each time, like you bring your moods to the studio, you don't go just to work, you're there purely for creativity. And I do think there's a difference between creativity and artwork, but that's for another episode. See, look, I'm getting new ideas just talking about this. If you go in with a ritual, as in like a way of getting yourself into the creative mindset just by the way you pick up your tools, the way you clean your space, the way you organize your papers and your brushes and your canvas on the easel or whatever. If you come up with a ritual and then try it a couple times in a row when you're going to your creative space, it can be like, it's such a powerful way of not feeling the fear of the blank canvas. And it helps eliminate the opportunity for that anxiety to show up. Rituals are so powerful, and I've talked about them many times in past episodes, but just having something that you do every time to make your life easier for creativity and like direct your brain towards making things, it takes off. It works really, really well. And I'm going to tell you mine now. Again, I've talked about this past episodes, but I just love talking about these things, that it's so fun. My first and favorite ritual that I do is making tea for myself. Recently, I've become an affiliate with Friday Afternoon Tea House, which is in Wallingford and here in Seattle. And I make a pot of Friday's tea for myself basically every single time I'm in the studio, which is like every day basically. And I will, set the temperature right in my teapot. I'll get the leaves. I'll pick out the kind of tea I want each day. I sweeten it with sugar or honey or whatever. And then I pick out the cup I want and I make myself a big pot of loose leaf. It's great. If you're interested in some loose leaf tea of your own, I've got a coupon code for you in the show notes, but I'll just tell you it here now. It's Cheers10, CHEERS, the number 1, the number 0, and you can use that for 10% off your entire order. Amazing. After I make myself a pot of tea, which, again, every single time I'm going to the studio, the tea is coming with me. I will then do a little check of the space, right? I'm looking, okay, does anything need to be thrown out? Does the floors need to be swept? Do I need to water my plants? And I do like the, I guess, building maintenance of the creative space at the very beginning of the creativity of my creative time. So I enter my studio, I check those things. If they're done, then I go to my easel where usually I have a piece that's in progress, but if it's a blank canvas day, I will pull out my new canvas, set it up on my wall easel, and then usually start drawing one of my geometric grids or one of my broken symmetry shapes, and that is how I kick things off. Every day that I have something that is not a blank canvas on my easel, I will make sure at the end of the session to lay out my colors and my brushes for the next session on my desk. So it's ready to go the next time I'm there. Having this 2 minutes of forethought of, okay, what am I going to work on next time helps prevent the fear of the blank canvas. It's very nice. So rituals, we love it. One thing I'm trying to incorporate, and this is going to be step number 4 here. Is it step 4? It might be 3. We're not going to number them. I will, when I edit this later, and I'll, write it out all fancy, but for my brain, we're just going to, what are numbers? We don't need them. For the next step is something I'm trying to do is add something to my ritual, which is warming up my hands. I am prone to getting carpal tunnel issues. I'm prone to getting soreness in my hands if it's too cold out, like arthritis. And full disclosure, I'm 33 here, and I already have these problems. And I'm thinking, okay, if I want to paint for the next 30 years, I need to be warming up my hands. Because if you're a creative, especially if you are a hardcore creative, you're making art all the time, you got to be warming up your hands. And so I have a couple stretches that I do, and maybe I'll walk you through my warm-up ritual of my hand stretches and do an audio guide to that sometime. That could be a fun. See, we're getting even more ideas. It's great. I'm gonna write this down. Okay, an audio guide for hand stretches. Amazing. Okay, so we're gonna do a little warm up of your hands, and you stretch your hands and you stretch your legs and your arms and your shoulders, and just that. Doing those stretches while you're thinking of what you're gonna work on next, right? So you do the stretches while you're looking at the artwork. It keeps you in the creative state, and that feels good. All right, so if you have done all of those other things and you're still feeling the fear of the blank canvas, we need to break down what your project is and what your insight and your big picture idea is into its smallest step. We need to think about, okay, what did you come here with the intention for? And if you didn't have one, that's its own thing. But let's say you did have a project in mind. You're like, okay, I'm going to make up a project now. The project is you wanted to draw a picture of a phoenix with a cool dark background. Okay, that's the idea. And you're like, okay, I bought a canvas, or no, let's say it's a canvas. You bought a canvas and it's 3 feet. It's fairly, well, for me, it's medium size, but that's, kind of big. And you're like, all right, where do I even begin? So think about your project super logically. It's okay, we have all these ideas, we have all these colors in my mind, and it's kind of an idea, and you know what you want to do this phoenix for. You were inspired by something. So what you're going to do is you're going to break down every individual little step of making the painting and write it down into its one sitting task. I love a one sitting task. I talk about it all the time here on the podcast, but basically what it means is, can you do one of the checklist items in for creative? Normally I would say this would be for a 30-minute task, but for creativity, I would say, can you do this in an hour or even 2 hours? So for our phoenix painting here, we're going to have the drawing underneath it, right? So we need to draw out the figure. We need to do some sketches of the composition even before that. See, I'm doing it backwards, but you do some compositions in your sketchbook, and then you pick one of those that you think is strong, and then you sketch it out onto the canvas, and then you're going to paint a ground to give it a nice even tone, and then you're going to pick out your main colors and start mixing colors, right? And then the next one would be, okay, maybe we're doing the sky in one day, in one sitting, and then we do the base colors of the phoenix in another, and then we go back in and we start adding the broad strokes, and then we start doing the details, and all of those items are different days of working on the project, right? When you break it down like that, you have a plan, and you're not afraid to start because you know what to do next. And knowing what to do next is so powerful. So it's so helpful. It gives you direction. And when it's not such a big thing as in, okay, today we're going to paint a phoenix painting. Like, that's a lot. But if today's just like, okay, we're going to make thumbnail sketches that are literally the size of your thumbnail, that's a lot easier. You're like, I can make 10 of those in like 15 minutes. Easy. Right? It feels fun. So we've broken down our goal, and that gives you some direction. Now, if you're like, okay, I have pulled out this canvas from my pile of canvas. What is the plural of canvas? It's just still canvas. It's like, what is the plural of sheep? Anyways, you've pulled out a random canvas and you put it on the easel and you're like, I think I'll paint this today. But what do I make? When you truly have no idea, there's this list I have that I think you should make. If you're like, I don't know what to make at all, except that I want to make something, and you've done the mess it up, you've set down a tone, you've thought about the steps. I like to think about my weaknesses in this moment. And I know you're thinking, okay, but if I'm feeling anxiety, why should I think about weaknesses? Isn't that going to make me more anxious? And for me, it doesn't. I don't know if it'll for you, but for me, I think about, where do I want to strengthen my art? Where do I want to come up with better tools, better technique, better ways of looking that will strengthen everything I do? And so I have this list of what I call Stevie's weaknesses. And I'm like, okay, I could get better at portrait drawing. I could get better at following my eye line and my pencil line at the same movement, right? And like getting really specific. I could get better at specificity. I could get better at color combination work. I could get better at most of the things that I really need to improve on are very realistic kinds of painting. I'm primarily an abstract oil painter, so whenever I need to practice something, I usually go for realism as it plays directly to my weaknesses and not something I'm doing all the time, and it makes my abstract work stronger. So if you were a realist painter, I would actually say you should try abstraction as something to practice. Anyways, so I have this like giant list, and sometimes they're really broad, like you need to practice working with red tones, and sometimes they're like super specific, and they're like, you need to practice working with the 8H graphite pencil and working on this one still life that you have in the back of your book. Or they're like, oh, you should do a transcription, which is a painting that you make with a 1-inch brush, and the painting is the size of a postcard, and you try to copy a masterwork in the painting that is the size of a postcard with a 1-inch brush. It's very hard, especially when you have to do it fast. You're supposed to do it in under an hour. Oh boy, it's fun. And it tells you a lot about what you need to work on. It's good. So if you're ever like, oh, I don't know what to work on, you just look at this list that you've written out. And I think if you are looking at the blank canvas and you instead decide to write out this list, that is a good use of time. That is still creating something. That is still making some kind of mark. Even though the canvas at the end of the day is probably still blank, you now have a plan for what to work on next time. And you can pick one out and be like, next time I'm working on this one. Or that one. Number 7, number 10, whatever. Will I share this with you? I might share this with you. I might share the whole list with you. My list is like 28 things long. It could be longer. It's very good. Anyways, so in this way, we are expanding on our strengths. We are expanding on what we want to move forward in the future, in our future setting, in our goals, and it's pretty great. Sometimes, though, you're like, okay, I'm in the studio, and I've been working a lot. I've been painting a lot. I personally have just gone through a push period where I made 7 paintings in 2 weeks, and that was kind of insane. And at this point, for this week, I'm like, I've got a canvas on the wall, and it's blank, and I'm thinking, I'm kind of exhausted. I'm not going to say I'm burned out. I don't think I'm there yet, but I am like, whoa. And in that case, I would say take the canvas off the easel and put it back on the pile of paintings that you might start someday and take a break. If you have the opportunity financially to take time off and go do something that is completely unrelated to your artwork, that can be a really good a really good thing. This is specifically for people who have a lot of productivity with their work. They produce a lot of inventory for their artwork. Taking a break and like going somewhere else to draw inspiration, to refresh your brain, even if it's not artistically directed, like I'm gonna refresh my brain by going to an art museum, like none of that. Where you're just like, okay, maybe today we'll go for a walk, and the walk is to the ocean. Maybe today we will go to our neighbor's farm and volunteer for an hour and, pet the goats. Maybe today we will go to a protest and do some social justice work, and that will feed my creativity just by being in an entirely different environment, right? I love traveling. I love traveling so much. And it's because I always feel inspired after the end of a trip. I always feel like, oh, I can't wait to go back to the studio because I have all these ideas. I would very much encourage you on your notes app in your phone to make a list of ideas of work that you could create in the future while you're out and about. So if you ever have an idea, like in your sketchbook isn't with you or whatever, you pull out your notes app and write this idea down. Write as much detail about it as possible, and then carry on with your day. And when you get back to the studio, open up that app and see what you've written, and if it's good or not, and if you still remember the idea and it's full, and try it, because that could be fun to pull from. After all of this, if you are still like, I don't know what to make. I don't know even like what materials to use. I don't know if I should do what I've been doing or if I should try something different, and you're just kind of like in a rut. I think you should talk to somebody. I think you need to talk to a friend. Talk to another creative person, not necessarily your best friend, but another creative person, and kind of just hash out what you're feeling here. A lot of the times, whenever I'm feeling the hesitancy to go to a canvas, it's because something else is going on in my life where I'm just nervous about it. And I'm just like stressing and depressing and not sleeping, the works. And usually it's something outside of my creative work that is pulling me away from creativity to focus on that instead. And you got to give room for that. So either talk to a friend who's creative and see if that can direct you back into creativity, or take time off, take time away from it. Take time to help your family member move. Take time to help your friend find a date. Take time to do whatever it is to, do some housework, whatever is pressing, whatever is needed to be done. And we're not doing this in a procrastination kind of way, but just acknowledging sometimes the artwork needs to wait. Not always. I don't usually say this, and it's an art podcast, so it feels weird to say that, but sometimes the artwork needs to take the back seat. And the creativity is still happening because you are a creative person. So it's not like you're not doing creativity. It just doesn't look like picking up a pen and putting it to paper. Lastly, one of my favorite things to do is just experiment. This kind of goes back to making a mess and to messing it up. When you aren't sure what to make and you have in your possession materials that you don't often touch, maybe it's time to pull this out. Dust off your calligraphy pens. That's me. That's what I need to do. Take out your markers, get your smudgy pencils and your graphites, and just play with your materials. You're not here to make something perfect. You're here to make something frankly imperfect and just fun and silly and joyful. Put on your music and try and get into that kind of groove. Make it happy. That's all the advice I got for you today. I hope you're feeling inspired after listening to this. And if you are facing the blank canvas and it's like still feeling debilitating, and you've listened to the 25 minutes I've been talking here about defeating it, you are absolutely free to send me a message. If you are still feeling like, I just don't know what to do, I'm stuck here and I don't know how to do anything further, send me a comment, send me a DM if you don't want to do it publicly, and hopefully I can help you get going again and get creating, because it is my joy to help you artists be creative and continue to find happiness in your work, because we all need it. If you've liked today's episode of Brushwork Podcast, will you please leave a review or a comment and let me know how you liked it, because it helps me reach more artists and helps me reach a bigger audience with the podcast. If you've liked this episode and you want to follow me on Instagram, my name is stephaniescott.art over there. The podcast is at brushworkpod. And that's that. All right. I hope you have a great creative day. Make good choices, everyone. And until next time, see you later. Bye.